Thank you. Okay, go for it.
Okay. Setting superintendent salary. One of the most impactful duties a county board and a county board member has because it affects county office finances, operations, and governance. So it's a big deal. So what we will cover. So we're going to cover the law that relates to this function, the impact of the county board setting the superintendent's salary, landmines that one should attempt to avoid, to review or not to review. If you don't have a policy on this subject, get one. We're going to walk through an outline of the MCOE policy, which we've spent a lot of time on and feel is has served us well and is a pretty good policy. Touch on the lawyer thing again, and then we'll have questions of a non-legal nature. All right. So let's start with the law. First bullet, California Constitution, Article 9, Section 3.1 states that the board, quote, shall fix the salary of the county superintendent of schools, unquote, period. Like so many things in the California Constitution as relates to the functions of county offices and county boards, it is brief and vague. And so there has had to have been some stuff to fill in around that as we've evolved over the time. I think that was written in the late 1800s. Um, Next up is Ed Code 1209, which states that a county superintendent of schools shall not increase his or her salary, financial remunerations, benefits, or pension in any manner or for any reason without bringing the matter to the attention of the County Board of Education for its discussion at a regularly scheduled public meeting of the board and without the approval of the County Board of Education. I believe this was put in because there had been instances where superintendents had acted independently in this regard, which would be in violation of Article 9, Section 3.1 of the state constitution. So there is something in there that prohibits superintendents from acting unilaterally on this. Education Code 12.7 states that in no case will the salary of the county superintendent be lowered during the term of office. Now, you might be saying to yourself, why would that ever happen? Well, there's been a couple of recent circumstances where the relationship between the county and superintendent and the county board in some counties was so bad that it's good that this part of Ed Code is in there. Next, however, the board has the authority to decrease the salary of the superintendent after the election for the term for which the superintendent was elected. Now, this is an opinion of the California Attorney General, which is basically accepted now as the guidelines that we operate under. And this applies to both re-elects and newly elected. So the board has the authority to decrease the salary of the superintendent after the election for the term for which the superintendent was elected. Okay? All right. Last two. While the board has the power to decrease the superintendent's salary, it may not do so retroactively. Compensation may be decreased only as to those services not yet rendered. You can't go back and say, well, for your last term, we're reducing your salary by $30,000 a year, so now you owe us $120,000. That was also part of California Attorney General finding. And then the board may select the time and frequency of changing the salary of the superintendent, and it is under no duty to set such a salary before an election. So we really have a lot of leeway of when we go about setting the superintendent's salary. Okay, Next slide. Okay, what is the impact of this? As I said, this is a really critical function of county boards. You think of it this way: you are responsible for setting the compensation for the chief executive of a multi-million-dollar organization. That's a pretty big responsibility. Not many people have that responsibility, either in public life or even in private life, to set the chief executive compensation for an organization as large as a county office of education. We're pretty mid-sized, and our budget's well over $100 million. So you're setting the executive salary for somebody who's running an incredibly big organization. Next, the superintendent is the bell cow of the COE when it comes to administrative compensation and therefore operating costs. The superintendent is at the top of the ladder. Now, as a lot of us have experience, everybody's compensation then kind of waterfalls after that. So when you're setting the salary for the superintendent, you're not just setting the salary for the superintendent, you're in essence setting expectations for the rest of particularly the administrative staff of the county office. Next, if the compensation is too low, if the compensation is too high, it puts the COE in a position where resources needed to be focused on administration compensation instead of programs. You're spending your money to pay the executives where that money could be spent on programs. This is something that should be of concern, particularly as we start to look and anticipate any economic downturns. Because if you set the superintendent's salary when times are good, and money is coming, falling from the sky, as they say, but then you have an economic downturn, that you have a contract, you have a contract with that individual where you have to honor that, as we talked about in the law. And so now you are going to be challenged with funding everything below it. And then on the flip side, if the compensation is too low, the COE risks losing the superintendent and other high-performing staff to better paying opportunities. So you could be very, very frugal, but then, an opportunity opens up, not just for the superintendent, whether it's to move on to another non-elected position, but mostly for the staff underneath the superintendent. So the impact of what we do here is pretty significant. Okay, next slide. Landmines, things that you want to make sure that you're aware of so you don't get yourself in trouble. Okay. Number one, you're responsible for setting the compensation for a countywide elected official that you don't have any other authority over. That just by design can cause some friction. Now, some people are, quite honestly, may not mind the fact that it causes friction. Others may want to avoid that friction, but friction can definitely occur when you are basically the one who determines what the superintendent puts in their bank account. There's no two ways about that. Number two, if you are considering lowering the compensation for your incumbent superintendent going into a new term, you are doing it wrong and you need to reevaluate. Okay? There was an issue with one county where this came up, where it was a symptom of the very, very bad relationship that the superintendent and the county board had. And I really can't think of any scenario where a county board would be looking to lower the compensation of the incumbent superintendent going into the next term where everyone's going to be on the same page and singing Kumbaya. You may be very unhappy with your superintendent. You may have conflicts with your superintendent. But the way to address that is not by, in essence, taking a hatchet to their paycheck. That is not going to do anything but make the situation worse. And one of the things that I've always talked about as the leadership of ACCBE has always talked about is, shared governance, the concept of shared governance. And if you're in a situation where you're so mad at your superintendent, you want to lower their salary, your shared governance needs a lot of work. So if any of the board members ever start talking about that's a direction that they want to go, that's something you need to be really, really careful about. All right, next one. Everyone who oh, no, I'm sorry. The next, go back, please. Okay, everyone who runs for county superintendent knows what the current compensation is. So be mindful of that, okay? I'll give you our county for example. We have the wonderful Dr. Gus on the call with us tonight. Dr. Gus has made it clear that she is retiring, and so she will not be running for the next term. There are a couple of candidates we already know of. But we got to make sure that they're not making the assumption that the compensation is going to be the same that it is right now for Dr. Gus. It may well be. The fact of the matter is that Dr. Gus has extensive experience as the county superintendent. The people who would replace her have not been the county superintendent. So it's not a done deal that the compensation will be the same. But you need to make sure you're managing the expectations of the people who are looking to fill that office. And you don't get into a situation where it looks like a bait and switch, where the person who now is the elected individual is surprised and unhappy that the compensation is not the same for the person that was there before him. So it's something to be mindful of. And lastly, if you don't stay current on the superintendent compensation, the situation can snowball. If, let's say, for example, you have a superintendent who has been there for a while, but has been fine with keeping their salary low and, not taking the car allowance and all of those things. Well, now you have a new superintendent who's coming in where that doesn't fit anymore. And now you're in a position where you have to make a 10, 20, 25% increase in the superintendent's compensation just to get caught back up. Those are the types of things that can draw the attention of taxpayer groups and concerned citizens, as well as the media. So yeah, it's great that you have a superintendent who's willing to keep their compensation low, but in the end, that can come up and bite you. Okay, next slide. All right, to review or not to review. We're talking about giving in essence, a performance review or doing a performance evaluation of the superintendent to coincide with setting of the salary if you have an incumbent superintendent and they're going into a new term. Now, for the rest of the world, this is not a revolutionary idea. In fact, most people would like a performance review associated with an evaluation of whether or not or what their future compensation is. This is a very, very unique relationship, though, because the county superintendent of schools is an elected office as prescribed by the California Constitution. The evaluation of the job an individual is doing in that position is ultimately in the hands of the voters. For all of except for the counties where it is an appointed or hired superintendent by the county board, they answer to the voters. They run for office. They tell the voters what they're going to do. The voters decide if they want to either bring them into the office or retain them in the office, they are accountable to the voters. And I know from past experience that this can be a sensitive subject with a lot of superintendents, and rightfully so, for the reasons I just described. However, the voters do not set the compensation for the office holder. The county board does. And nothing in Ed Code prohibits the board from considering the job performance of the office holder when doing so. So there's nothing that prevents it. If this is something that the county board wants to do or certain county members are really interested in doing, there's nothing that prevents it. And there could be a logical argument made for doing it. If you're looking at determining somebody's future compensation, it's not out of the realm of reasonable thought to evaluate the job that they've done in the position that you're now evaluating their compensation for. But if this is something your board is interested in, proceed with great caution. Great caution. One of the most difficult conversations I ever had with my previous superintendent, not the wonderful Dr. Gus, was when I broached the subject of would the superintendent like the accomplishments that had been done in the recent past considered by the committee in setting the compensation. And the response was a stern reminder of bullet number 1. So it's something that I wouldn't necessarily call it, the third rail, but it's something that's very, very sensitive. And so the question you have to ask is the juice worth the squeeze? And so the fourth bullet recommendation is to focus on the position, not the person. Focus on how your county superintendent fits, not only within the structure within county offices within the state of California, but within the LEA structure of your own county. And then except for factoring in relevant experience. If you, for example, know that the individuals who are running for the vacant seat have extensive experience as superintendents of large districts. That's different than somebody who's basically not been a superintendent before. So that is a reasonable thing to factor in. But the recommendation is to really try to just look at the position and keep the person and the personalities out of it. Okay, next slide. Okay. If you don't have a policy, get one. As we've covered, this is an incredibly important responsibility that has far-reaching impact on the operations and well-being of your county Office of Education. It's a big deal. It doesn't come up a lot, like a lot of things for the most troublesome or controversial or emotional things the county boards deal with. Charter school renewals, charter school petitions, work of the county committee. This is up there. Doesn't come up a lot, but when it does, it's pretty important, and you need to get it right. So the second bullet is it is fraught with peril, as the consequences of missteps and mismanagement can have very harmful ramifications. You work for years with your board retreats and all of those things and setting goals and getting aligned with the superintendent, and then you misstep here, whether it's an innocent misstep or not, and you've kind of thrown that all in the trash and you have to start over again. So it's something that you really need to be cognizant of. So therefore, if your county board does not have a policy covering the setting of superintendent salary and total compensation, it needs to be a priority to establish one. Because like with most things that we do, if you have a written policy that has been well vetted and reviewed, you follow the policy, and things end up working pretty smoothly. It's when you don't have a policy and people start shooting from the hip or kind of making it up as they go along that expectations are disappointed and feelings get hurt. So if your county board does not have a policy covering the setting of superintendent salary, it needs to be a priority to establish one. And if your county board does have a policy, don't assume it will keep you out of trouble. When's the last time that that policy was implemented? Have your policy committee review it at least every 2 years. Things change a lot. Staffing changes, all these things can change. So like most policies, your policy committee, your board policy committee needs to stay up on it. And they need to keep and review it on a regular basis. Okay. All right. I see a question from Chelsea. Do superintendents advocate and present their accomplishments to justify a salary they would like to have? That is a conversation that you need to have with your superintendent. Some, I think, would be very, very interested in that. If they've done things, for example, under Dr. Gus's leadership, we opened a brand new community school, which took a ton of work and has made a huge impact in our community and with our alternative ed programs. Those sorts of things, I think some superintendents would want to put their hand up and say, yeah, I'd like to put together a list of my accomplishments and have you review it. But that's a discussion that you need to have with the superintendent and incorporate it into part of the policy. Let's see. And then Rita, are these guidelines of how long after the election are their guidelines of how long after the election the salary can be set? Great question. We're going to go through our policy a little bit, but the answer is no. A good guideline is before the person starts their term, because you have to set the salary before the person starts their term. But does it say it has to be 2 weeks or 3? No, there's nothing in there. Pretty much what we went through in the first 2 slides is the amount of that is written in law, the Constitution, and Ed Code about this subject. So it is, a lot of it is to make it up as you go along. Okay, so here are the MCOE policy highlights. First, a policy statement. And this is something that is important, that should be agreed upon, or at least knowledgeable to the superintendent. And it's basically a statement of how we want to do business. Our policy statement is: a county superintendent provides county-wide leadership essential for public education and should be fairly compensated for their services. Next, we recite all the legal authority that we went through earlier. So next, we have these timing guidelines to address the question. So, and these are kind of, can happen when the circumstances warrant it. Okay. So number 1 is prior to the deadline to withdraw from an election. Now, if you don't have a contested election, that deadline doesn't really matter. If you do have a contested election, but you have an incumbent as well as somebody else, or if you just, in our case, we don't have an incumbent anymore and we have people who will not have been in the seat, we want to make sure we set the deadline, or we set the compensation before the deadline to withdraw from the election. So if one of those candidates looks at it and says, oh, that's not what I was expecting it to be, you don't get into that situation where they have spent all the time and money to run for the office and then the compensation isn't what they expected it to be. So that's one of the criteria that we look at, and we will be doing that since we have looks like we will have a contested election coming up with the incumbent not part of it. Okay, new term for the incumbent county superintendent. So if whether that's appointed in lieu of election or the election happens and now the county superintendent is coming back, do you need to reevaluate where you're at? And this is the time, if anybody was interested in adjusting or, quote, lowering the compensation, this would be the time to do it, because you do this for the incumbent before they take office. Okay. What our experience has been in the last 2 elections, no one ran against the incumbent, Dr. Gus. And so we did not need to do it before the withdrawal date. We just waited till after the election, and then we did a review and we moved on from there. All right. Appointment made to fulfill remainder of a current term. So let's say Dr. Gus had resigned because she just could not stand to be away from her wonderful grandbabies anymore. It was the job was taking too much time, which is all true. And she said, I'm out. And so now we are appointing somebody to fulfill the rest of the term. We have the ability to then make a change to the compensation to go, if necessary or if appropriate, since you're going from somebody who has been the county superintendent for 8-10 years versus now somebody who is walking into the job as an appointee. At the request of a county board member or of the county superintendent. So if the county superintendent says, you know what, we need to review this for whatever reason, or a county board member during the term says, you know what, we need to review this for whatever reason, that would trigger us going into this process. Again, can't go backwards. This would only be to confirm what the current compensation is or add to it going forward. And then also one of our policies is at the request of the county superintendent to apply the COLA provided to management staff. So during all of the negotiations and all of the setting and maturations of putting the budget together, if after that process there has been a COLA for the management staff, and the superintendent would like that to apply, the superintendent can make that request, and then it will be evaluated by the compensation committee. This wasn't a big deal until about 2022, when this thing called inflation happened. And then it's something that became a lot more important.
John, Marcy raised her hand with a question before we move on to the next slide.
Okay, Marcy.
Yeah, I did, but I think I misread what your slide was saying. I was thinking that you were meaning interim county superintendent instead of incumbent, but I think that's the following bullet, right? On your bullets there. So set the salary when there's a new term for a superintendent that's been reelected.
Right.
And also if the superintendent left and needed to appoint an interim.
Right, and under both circumstances. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I thank you.
Okay. And then going, let's see. Judy had a question. Can benefits be lowered? Yes, they can. That has to be the benefit. It all has to happen at the same time. So if you wanted to, if you had an incumbent superintendent that was reelected and you wanted to lower the benefits, you would have to do that before the new term started. Do all county boards have authority to appoint to fill a superintendent's vacancy? Are there any cases that deal with this question? If my understanding, if you'll, for counties that have elected superintendents, and if that superintendent resigns, it is the county board's responsibility to appoint a replacement for the remainder of the elected term. And if any of my county board members wants to, Dr. Gus, thank you. That is correct. So yes, if your county superintendent were to leave for whatever reason, it is the board's responsibility to appoint somebody to fill out that term, and then the county board should also evaluate that person's compensation to make sure that it is what it should be.
I thought you could also elect, except that it's expensive.
I'm sorry?
I thought that you could also go for election, but it's expensive.
Yes. Yeah, I think you can call a special election, and that, just to, pull a scenario out of the hat, let's say somebody was just reelected and then they had, a fatal accident or something like that, and you're going to appoint for the majority of the term, you might wish to look at doing an election. But yes, elections are very expensive, particularly if they're in the scenario I just did. It's going to be an off-cycle election, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So, and most of these circumstances, it's an appointment. Okay. Let's see. So, Marcy, so you wouldn't change salary if a challenger won over the incumbent and the challenger did not match the same qualifications. Well, you could, but that's why we set the salary before the withdrawal date, right? So in your scenario, we are making a decision on what the salary is going to be before, and gives the challenger enough time to withdraw. If the challenger wins, we have set the salary. We could, before they take their seat, change it again. That gets a little dicey. This is why, I put the landmine slides in there. So it's something that you got to be very careful about, but let's be realistic. If you have an incumbent superintendent who's very popular, right, and is very likely to win, you can probably wait to set the compensation till after the election, if you're super confident that that person's going to win. Or you could set the compensation before the election so the other person has a chance, to potentially withdraw. Really, the withdraw happens when, in our scenario right now, if anybody's assuming that doesn't have extensive experience as not only a county superintendent, but a superintendent of any large district, if they think they're going to run for the Monterey County superintendent position and win and get the exact same compensation that Dr. Gus gets, that's probably not going to happen. So you want to make sure, again, you're managing those expectations. But let's say Dr. Gus was running again and we had a high degree of confidence that Dr. Gus was going to win. We'd probably go ahead and just confirm what the compensation was going to be. Did I answer your question, Marcy?
Yeah, it does. And it seems to me that it could be a really sticky situation.
Oh yeah. Again, if you go back,
you were talking about the peril. I know.
Yeah, no, but when you go back to what's in the ed code, it really does, make it extremely challenging.
Yeah.
to basically do this and do it right without running into problems. Okay, so next slide, please. All right, so how do you set the salary? Okay, so whenever we go through this process, whether it's for reevaluation of the incumbent who has been reelected, or whether the incumbent or the county board member has said we need to look at this again because we think we're out of whack, or for what we're going to do now is set it for somebody who is not the incumbent because the incumbent's not running. So how do you get to that number? So we first benchmark salaries. First, go to 3 counties in our same class. And we are a class.
3.
Dr. Gus, what class are we?
Class 3.
We're class 3. Thank you. So we're class 3. So we will go out and we will look at 3 counties in the same that are class 3 counties and what their compensation is. Then we look at the 4 largest district superintendents in our county. So that's going to be the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, Salinas High School District, Salinas City Elementary District, and probably Alisal. Is Alisal the 4th?
Yep, that's correct.
So we're going to put those numbers into the pot as well as the compensation for the 2 community college presidents that we have. Okay. So that's going to give us our benchmark of where everything is. And then we're going to, for incoming superintendents, we're going to look at their experience in public education. If somebody has, been a superintendent for very large school districts, then that's going to be different for someone who has little or no experience as a superintendent. We don't get a lot of those, but it can happen. And it's in today's political environment where people are kind of bringing the culture wars into school administration, you can get somebody who's very popular and technically qualified to meet the requirements, but doesn't have a lot of experience in running a school. So those need to be factored in. So that's how we basically come up with the benchmark. Again, for us, it's pretty much this. We are evaluating the position. We're not evaluating the person. So then, other compensation and benefits. All of this rolls together, okay? You can't have the county board setting the salary and then the superintendent deciding what their car allowance is, or if they get a mobile phone, or if the county is going to pay for their home Wi-Fi. That the superintendent cannot make a unilateral determination on anything that relates to money going from the county office to them. That isn't, the same as it is for everybody else, right? We have an expense policy. You go on a trip, you get reimbursed for the trip. That's not part of this. This is about how for money that the county office is paying the individual to do the job. So transportation allowance. Do you pay for miles? Do you provide a car? That's a big one. Mobile devices, home allowance. Do you provide a computer? Do you provide a laptop at home? Do you pay for the cell service? Do you provide a phone? Do you pay for the internet service? So those are all things that need to be determined. And maybe provided the same benefits as the management staff. Okay, so you look at what the rest of the management staff is receiving in terms of benefits, and a good rule of thumb is to basically just make it the same. Not higher, not lower, consistent with everybody else is getting from a benefit standpoint, to make sure that no one basically gets their nose bent on it being different. And then the last one here is we have use of the COE credit card. And, people are like, well, of course, what do you mean? Everyone has a Cal card, or everyone has are you saying that, that's something that you would regulate? No, that goes back up to, if it's the same as everybody else, it's not part of this discussion. If, for example, and this is in olden times, the county office is providing a credit card to the superintendent for their personal use, right? So in essence, the county office is using its financial background to underwrite a line of credit for the superintendent. That is a form of compensation. So if any superintendent has a credit card that is a quote county office credit card that they can use for their personal use, then that's something that needs to be delineated. Okay. Next slide. Okay. This is the big one. So who does this work? We have a review subcommittee. So it's 3 county board members chosen by the board president. So they basically follow the policy. They work with the staff. They work with the CBO to pull all of this information, and the county superintendent. None of this is done behind the county superintendent's back. That's how you get yourselves into big trouble. It's all in the open. This is all public record. So they do the evaluation, pull the data together, do the evaluation, then they make a recommendation to the county board. Then the county board considers and takes possible action on the recommendation, and the county board makes an oral report of action taken and is reflected in the minutes. We usually, you can, depending upon the nature of the thing, you could put it on the consent agenda. You don't need to make it a big show. If it doesn't need to be a big show, don't make it a big show. So that is our policy. At the end of the presentation, you can see my email, and if anybody would like us to send you a copy of the Monterey County policy, we are happy to do it. Or if you can find it on our website with all of our policies, and your policy should be very available for the public to view as well. All right, next slide. Lawyers again. Disclaimer once again, I am not an attorney in any way, shape, or form. So none of what I've covered should be considered legal advice. County boards should always consult with their own legal resources when questions on this subject arise, and have legal review of associated policies. Now, most county offices, county boards, and superintendents share legal resources for most things. And it is probably completely appropriate to do the same if you're making any changes to the policy that you have or establishing a policy. In that rare instance where the board is not comfortable using that legal advice, this is one of those things that the board can get separate legal advice on. But there's so many policies. A lot of this was based upon what is in the San Mateo policy. We have our own policy. There's a lot of work that's already been done out here. So a lot of it is probably just, copy, cut, and paste. Okay. Thank you all for attending. There is my email if anybody wanted to email me questions or for any documentations. And now we will open it up to questions. Okay, I see Michael Greer has his hand up.
I just want to thank you, John, for giving me more questions than answers. Okay. It's really made me think about exactly how we're paying the county superintendent, who is also our district superintendent. what the relationship is. So I appreciate, what you have said and what you've showed us. It's going to really help me out tomorrow.
Yeah, you are in a unique situation, and I will not claim to know anything about it. And that's one where, yeah, you probably need somebody who has a lot more experience, or experience specifically in this circumstance. You want to make sure that, um, that the county superintendent is not in any way setting their own compensation. Now, in your circumstance, it's local boards determine what a county, what a superintendent makes. So there's a lot of similarities, but I don't know where, one one hat starts and the other hat stops.
Well, that's exactly it. That's what I'm looking for, because I feel like our superintendent is underpaid for all the different things that we do. And along with the rest of our administration, I don't want to lose them because of their abilities to handle the different jobs that he has. But the things you gave me and the things you talked about is going to help me ask the questions that I need to ask in order to solve those issues. So thank you.
You're welcome. So Rita asked, if the superintendent is unilaterally deciding on some perks, what tools are available to the board as a remedy? My recommendation is, if you determine this, or if you are concerned about this, is that the board president have a private conversation with the superintendent. A lot of times, these things are pretty innocent. Because the law is so vaguely written. We've had this additional ed code and attorney general findings that may have happened, or things may have slipped through the cracks and so forth. I don't think you need to approach it in a way that is respectful, and with the idea that it's just a matter of cleaning things up to make them compliant, and you approach that. The board president would be the right person to approach that. If the board president doesn't get the answer that people are looking for, then that's another issue.
John, Greg has a question, and then there's a question in the chat around whether CSBA has a board policy around this, or whether that policy was developed by CCBE.
Greg, go ahead.
Great. So my whole background comes from being a city manager for most of my career, and now helping city councils evaluate and set salaries for city managers. So I've kind of been on both sides of that equation. This is very different, as I've learned. Couple questions. Can any of the work, I know if it's an ad hoc committee, that can be done not in the public space, though the reports have to be made publicly. Can the board discussion of salary setting be done in closed session, and only the final action taken in a regularly scheduled public meeting? Or does all the discussion have to occur in a public meeting?
It really all should occur in a public meeting, because you are not talking about, unless you are now basically, it's a legal matter. Hopefully it's not. But the only things that really should be in closed sessions should be legal matters, personnel things, real estate transactions. It's really in everyone's best interest to keep it in the public meeting realm. For no other reason, if you start to go to closed sessions on this, then everybody's wondering, oh, why are they in closed session? What's going on? Yeah. This is something, it's outlined in the ed code. That's why, again, have a policy that's easy for everybody to understand. It's completely objective. It's not subjective, and then there's no reason why it can't be covered in the public meeting.
And I guess I was assuming that because technically it's not a negotiation, but for
Nope.
cities, I become the council's negotiator with the bargaining unit of the city manager. And then I negotiate the city manager's compensation adjustment. And then that goes back to the council for action in public. Since this is not a negotiation, it's a salary setting process. I was thinking it probably didn't qualify, but I wanted to confirm that.
Yeah.
Second, and these are probably the same answer to both, can in a salary setting process, the board say that it will automatically go up by the same CPI as applied to other members of the workforce? Or can the benefits, like if the automobile allowance for all management team members goes from 250 to 300, that automatically applies to the superintendent, or do they require separate action?
I would, I think that's one where, I probably would defer to a legal review of that. My recommendation is no. Every time, we put in our policy where we have a COLA adjustment, either a board member or the superintendent can say, hey, I want that COLA adjustment to apply. You put it on an agenda, you review it, you vote on it. You don't have things happening that don't have a vote specific to it.
That makes sense. It's
yeah.
cleaner, more transparent.
Exactly.
Okay, that was my questions. Thank you. Thanks for doing this, John.
Oh, you're welcome. The question is about, does CSBA have a policy? And I don't know. I think it's fair to say that CSBA policies as it relates to county offices is still a work in progress. This one is so unique to us. I never even looked. When I was the chair of our first compensation committee, we had already had the part about the doing the evaluation of the other counties in our class and so forth. So a lot of it was already written for us, and then minor modifications as it came to things like the internet and supplying a computer and all of those things, including those things in. Never even went to see if CSBA has a sample policy on that, and if they did, no offense, I take it with a grain of salt, because this is such a unique thing between not only county boards and superintendents, but your county board and your superintendent. Okay, any additional questions?
I have a question. This is Judy.
Hey, Judy.
Hi. We have never had a committee until this new last superintendent. And then he wanted a committee. We formed a committee. We came back with some things and he didn't like it. And he said, well, who did you consult? Well, we talked to each other. We kind of wrote up a policy, and then the board voted on the policy, and we had two different options because he wanted a salary schedule. We'd never had a salary schedule. So we put in there steps 1 through 5, 1 being a low step for a new elected, because that's where the filing fee comes off of, is the base, as I understand it. And he says, well, okay, I should be on step 3 because this is my 3rd year. And I said, no, the steps don't say years, they just say steps. So it's being put back on the agenda for the 4th time. This, we just keep going on and on and on. Do we have to?
No. The answer is no. You don't have to put it on the agenda. It's one of those things. This is another one where my recommendation would be that the board president have a sit down with the superintendent and say, I don't want to see this on the agenda again.
Well,
We've made a decision. We've had this.
on the committee, and he announced that he couldn't work with the committee. He wanted a new committee, and one of them he couldn't get along with, namely me.
Well, that's unfortunate, because the law is pretty clear. He has no authority at all, zero, zip, in anything that has to do with his compensation. It is totally the purview of the board. If he was sitting next to me, I'd recommend him that he may try, honey instead of or the carrot versus the stick. But
Harassment. He's not getting what he wants, so he keeps putting it back on the agenda.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, really sorry. You are not obligated to do anything on it. And hopefully your board can rally around this and maybe gets the message.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to do that. Could I have just pulled it off of the agenda? Probably no. Okay.
There should be some understanding between the county superintendent and the county board about what is going on the agenda. It is the county board's meeting. It is not the superintendent's meeting. And Dr. Gus, if you want me to shut up, you tell me to shut up.
Well,
It is.
for example, he always put it at the very end of the meeting because he didn't want his staff to be involved. And I said, it doesn't belong there after all the reports. And we moved it up. Oh, he was angry.
Let's hear from Dr. Gus. She might have some insights if she's willing.
I was just going to say that you probably have a board policy that talks about how you establish your board meeting agenda. We do. And so what I do is I confer with the board president, and I don't put that agenda out unless I've conferred with the board president as to what's on that agenda. The other thing I was just going to comment on is, our policy, I feel, has served us well over my 2 terms. When you look at the overall comparison of where my salary falls in comparison to all the district superintendents and the 2 community college presidents in our county, I feel like I'm very fairly compensated. As you know, it is an elected position, so you shouldn't sign up for the position to get a high salary. Really, it's about we're here to serve. But at the same time, as John so eloquently stated, you are signing up for a position that does require typically 12-hour days. And, sometimes those crazy hours are on a bad week. It could be a 7-day week where you're working 12 hours. And on a good week, maybe it's not 12-hour days every day. But when you look at our policy and then how that has averaged out over time, I think it's very fair. Like John mentioned, sometimes as a county superintendent, you might be offering your employees an 8% raise because you can. But then in other years, you might only be able to offer them a 2% raise. And so the fact that the county superintendent's salary is not tied to what you're offering your employees, I know sometimes that's concerning maybe to other county superintendents, but in our county, as I said, when you look at where it has landed over all of the years that I have served, it's very fair and it has worked for me. And if for any reason it's not fair, there is a part of the policy that says you can come back to the county board and ask for the COLA that you're giving to your employees. I have never felt the need to do that. And I think if you just really look at the policy and how it plays out, I think you'll see that it is a very fair policy. And I like it that you don't have to come before the county board every year and ask for the county board to set the salary. It's not a popular thing for people to do. And so I like having the salary schedule. And again, over time, it seems to average out. And I consider it to be a very fair process and appreciate it.
Another landmine that I didn't, mention. Let's go in a scenario that you've had a long-standing superintendent and you have a long-standing staff, that the superintendent has determined what their compensation is. Now you have approved the budget that has that compensation in it. And let's say that superintendent is leaving, and you're going to have a new superintendent come in who doesn't have the experience, and you're looking to basically reset the compensation back for the superintendent. Well, make sure you don't undermine the superintendent's authority by setting that compensation too close to or below other members of the COE. Again, this is it is a significant responsibility, and I would go back to, that falls into your responsibility for approving the budget. Make sure that the superintendent is not, going hog wild on, and that's an overstatement. They're all wonderful people. Is not going, is too aggressively raising the staff of their subordinates that you're then going to have to deal with when it comes your time to set the superintendents. Marcy.
Yeah. I'm curious if your county or any of the counties present have also considered any comparison with other county level leaders. I know in our community, our news media loves doing that, saying, oh, the county superintendent's making so much, but the county whatever is only making so much, I'm just curious if any of your counties factor other county level positions into the equation.
Not the county government. Like I said, we factor in the presidents of our community colleges, which is, those are big deals, as well as the largest school districts. I'm pretty sure, Dr. Gus, that Monterey Peninsula and Salinas High School have equal to or larger budgets than ours. So we don't do it with the county government. I'd be interested if other people do it, but we make sure we do it with other leading educational people.
This is Yvonne Chen from Laco.
Hey, Yvonne.
Yes, we did. We have to. There's no other way for us to do that. I was the president at that time 2 years ago. So we compare to all the other big departments in LA County, the mental health, the physical health, DPSS, law enforcement, all of them. And we line them all up to really come across to determine a fair compensation for Dr. Eduardo. We did in Laco. Thank you.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
John,
Sarah.
Corinne also has a comment in the chat, but let's go to Sarah and then go to Corinne.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. So I was just going to ask you more, which you were just touching on. There's that statement at the beginning, the superintendent is the bell cow of the COE when it comes to administrative compensation.
Right.
So in our county, it seems like the rest of the administration, other than the superintendent, they have a salary schedule and they usually have the management cost of living increase, and that sets that. And I don't quite understand how that relates to the superintendent's salary.
Well, if you decided for whatever reason for the new superintendent to put their salary below what those salaries are, you now have the person who's running the organization making less than the people that work for him. That can be problematic.
Okay. It's not that, but we're not deciding those other salaries. You're just saying
no. Yeah, well, I will caveat, you approve the budget, and you're not going to have a line item veto and having a discussion about the deputy superintendent's salary being too high, so you want to reduce it when you're in the public meeting to approve the budget. If there is concerns about what the level of compensation for the the cabinet people, that's something that you need to be having as you're doing your budget development and you're having these discussions about what is the what's the economic impact looking like. Very reasonable discussion to have with the superintendent is that for your upcoming budget, we need to look at freezing compensation because we don't, we're now looking at potentially an economic downturn, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, part of the wider responsibility of the county board to be fiscally responsible for the operations of the county office, but it's kind of nebulous.
Thank you.
So Corinne's question was, does Monterey do the benchmark checking every year or only when a superintendent begins and then moves forward has a step system?
When one of those first five things gets triggered, that's when we do it. We do not do it on an annual basis. So we don't compel ourselves to do something we may not need to do, but we're very conscientious of, okay, we need to do it. So either one of those things is triggered or the superintendent, in the last circumstances when there was a COLA increase and the superintendent came to us and said, I would like the COLA increase as well. Or if for some reason we think that we need to address it. So we don't have it as a set schedule. We do have a set schedule of reviewing the policy. That's the thing that we want to make sure we're always up to date with. But we don't necessarily have a set schedule to review the compensation on a regular basis, which Dr. Gus mentioned was fine with her. We'll see about our next superintendent.
So you don't do an annual salary increase?
No.
You just decide when you want to do that?
Correct.
Okay.
It's so when they do that comparison,
yeah,
step A set at the average of the comparison, and then it goes up by 5% each year. And so when we were talking about, it's not tied to what the superintendent gives to the employees. For example, last year or the year before, we were able to give an 8% increase, but my salary still went up by 5% because that's my salary schedule. But then you look at this year, I'm able to give my employees a 2% increase and I'm still going up by 5%. See, it all averages out, like good years, bad years, as far as what we're able to give. But when you look, like, I do not feel that I wasn't properly compensated when I didn't get the 8%, because this year I only get to give a 2%, but my salary schedule still moves over by 5%.
Yeah, and I want to come back to, Greg kind of asked this question, and I said, don't put things in there where the salary is increasing and you're not taking votes on it. It can be a little bit of a gray area if you clearly have it outlined in your policy of what it's going to be, then then I think you're safe to have a system like we have that Dr. Gus just described. I'm just real sensitive because before Dr. Gus and before her predecessor, we had some things that were pretty embarrassing that I had to deal with my first couple of years on the board in terms of things that were done that really weren't done out in the public, and it was extremely uncomfortable.
And then Rita has a question: how would the board find out whether or not the superintendent is taking compensation or benefits that have not been presented to the board for a vote?
Good question. There should be full transparency, by the superintendent and the business office on those sorts of things and where compensation is being done. It's that's one of those things where it's not going to, show up at a board meeting and, climb up onto the podium and say, here I am. Um, you know, it, it's a bit of the honor system. Um, and if you have a really, really good policy that says this is the only way that you can be compensated, most superintendents are not, if they read the policy and they understand it, they're probably going to be disinclined to try and do something that isn't in that policy because that would be unpleasant for them.
And Dr. Gus also reminds us that the board does approve the budget. And so as you're going through your budget, you can be asking pointed questions, I guess.
Yes, yes. This is kind of I'm a big, big proponent of the board not showing up at the meeting in late May to approve the budget without having at least 3 meetings before that and big fat binders that go into great detail of literally every cent that is spent by the county office. I worked in a private sector and I had my operation, my last operation, the budget was $30 million a year. And then if you added postage, it was $130 million a year. And my boss made it sure that I understood I'm going to look at every single dime in your budget and we're going to have a discussion about it. And that's the attitude that I've always had. And to me, and Dr. Gus has been fantastic to work with. And I want to see the budget put forward in that level of detail early on so we can have a discussion about those things that we're concerned about or finding, well, what's this? So it really is incumbent upon us as county board members to make sure that we are getting the data we need to do the job that the Constitution says that we're supposed to do. Set the superintendent's salary and approve the budget.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. I don't see any more questions in the chat or anyone's hand up, so I'll give one last question if someone really has a burning one they want to ask. If not, I did want to say, John, thank you. I'm from an appointed superintendent, and so this has been very educational for me. And for me, one takeaway is that setting a superintendent's salary is so tied to our policy practices. It's tied to how we look at the budget. It's tied to our relationships with the superintendent. So thank you for bringing all that out around excellent. I would put all that under good governance and trustee board excellence. So before you leave, we'd like you to tell us one of your takeaways from today. Let's give John a little love. If everyone wants to use their reaction budget or give him a clap, we really so appreciate you and all your experience and your wisdom you've shared today. So thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure, and hope to see you all in Monterey in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Some of us will be there. I will be there. So please give us your takeaway in the chat. Just so we can do some reflection together and see what people are learning. And I was going to just read a few of them. Great presentation. We mentioned the handbook, which ACCBE has, which is posted on our website. Yeah, so let's see what else. Just people have learned a lot, and people are interested in looking at your policy that you have in Monterey. So thank you again, and people keep putting stuff in the chat. We want to just give everyone a heads up of what's coming up with ACCBE. If there's another slide, Chris. So on September 22nd, we have our quarterly board gathering online. It'll be at 6 o'clock. And this one is around effective governance. We're going to dive deep into setting board calendars, which came up tonight. We're going to talk about if you do retreats, examples of different retreat agendas, why do retreats, how to do follow-up, how to have an effective retreat. And then also we're going to look at board self-assessments. We have a few to share. The idea is to collect some of these practices, to share what we know and to collect others from you. And then we're working towards creating like a resource center on the ACCB website where all this information can be shared. So that's September 22nd. The next one we have coming up after that is, we're really excited. We have a 3-part series on court and community schools. The first one is October 9th. We are partnering with the state probation officers, with the Office of Youth and Community Restoration, and with the county SUPs, the JSAC group, the leaders who run our court and community schools. In the first session, we'll be hearing from each of them about kind of what the landscape looks like, what the rules and laws are, kind of what challenges they're seeing. So that'll be session 1. On October 30th, we'll have 4 county offices share spotlight best practices that they're doing around literacy, around CTE, around mental health, and working with kids with disabilities. And then the 4th session will be a student panel. This will be November 17th. The 3rd session, it'll be a student panel with kids who've been in our court and community schools. It'll also be a panel with some advocates. And then the end of the 3rd session as well, we will work with our county board trustees to develop an advocacy agenda, or start to develop an advocacy agenda related to things related to our court and community schools. So we're excited about this. We hope you'll come to all 3, but at least try to come to 1. So that's going to be happening in October and November. And I don't know if that was the last one. Oh, we want to thank, that is, but I also do want you to know we are working on a student board member training for both county board trustees and for county COE student board members. And that'll probably be in October, on a Saturday in early October. But finally, want to thank all 33 county boards who have joined. We're so proud and we're so excited to have you. And we're looking forward to continuing to make good trouble and to continuing to build our capacity to be excellent trustees. So with that, I think we're done. So please, if you want to stick around and chat for a few minutes, we'll do that. Otherwise, thank you for being here, and thank you, John. And thank you, Dr. Gus, for being with us too. Okay.
Thanks so much.
All right, everyone be well.
Bye.
We'll stick around just for a minute or two, but feel free to sign off. Great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Good seeing you, Judy.
Yes, it's good seeing you guys too. It's going to be interesting because our superintendent, this is about the 4th time it's on the agenda.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like you guys have a little work to do.
Well, and he wants the steps to be years, and they just say steps, so you could, you don't have to move them up. But anyway, it's going to be interesting. Have a good
good luck.
Yeah,
stay strong. Remember your role.
Yeah, have a good evening.
Okay, you too. Great. And who else is with us? Bev, good to see you. Can you turn the recording off, Chris?